What's up, amateur filmmakers? I'm Jaden, and today we're talking about found footage films. The found footage genre. Some people love it, some people hate it, but we can all universally agree that it is a subgenre full of terrible, terrible, terrible movies. This isn't really going to be a history or a deep dive piece, it's just going to be recommendations for some found footage stuff that I personally like and a little bit of an overview of the genre. Anyway, it's widely believed that the found footage genre sort of started with Cannibal Holocaust. That's kind of up for debate. Also, Cannibal Holocaust is a terrible movie, and they actually tortured animals in real life and got in trouble for it, so don't watch it. Shit. It's not really certain when the first found footage film really came out, though it is widely believed to be Cannibal Holocaust, though there are definitely entries into the subgenre before that. It was really popularized, though, with the Blair Witch Project and the subsequent Paranormal Activity films that came out 90s, 2000s. And given that quarantine's been going on for over a year now, 2020 has actually seen an incredible boost of found footage film. Because it's something you can shoot in your quarantine bubbles with almost no financial backlash and really no barrier to entry. The problem with found footage films is because it's so cheap to make and easy to create, there isn't really a barrier for someone else approving the work, which is both good because it gives films and filmmakers who don't necessarily have the connections that show business requires to be able to put something in front of an audience, and also bad because you get some really, really, really bad movies that didn't really get vetted by anyone other than a high school group of friends, which arguably has been some of the best found footage movies that you can find because at least they're entertaining. For example, Hornets, not the movie, the YouTube channel, really fun. I binged that all back to back. I'm not sure I could watch it again, but I sat down and started it and watched all of it, and it was a lot. One of the big problems with found footage films that people tend to blame the genre for, which is reasonable, is that there are a lot of bad movies. They tend to be very formulaic, they rely on low-quality jump scares, and don't really put any effort into storytelling most of the time. They also tend to do this thing where they try to wrap it up, even though the found footage subgenre is one that's actually really primed for you not having to explain what was going on. It's about the experience of what was happening, not the explanation of the experience. Without too much ado or procrastination, here's 10 found footage movies that I think are worth the watch. Up first on the list, we have 2014's The Taking of Deborah Logan. This film follows a crew that is making a documentary about Alzheimer's as they experience the life of an older woman that they're basically putting in their documentary. It's a slow movie that has a lot of tension based around an older woman who's slowly losing her cognizance, so it is a bit of a heavier subject matter and might be sensitive to viewers who are experiencing that or who have experienced in the past. It wasn't one of my favorites, but there is one scene in particular, and if you watch it, you will know exactly the scene I'm talking about, that still haunts the aching hallways of my nightmares, because I cannot unsee it, and it is without a doubt on my list of top 10 visual moments that have scarred me for all eternity. So that was fun. Up next, we've got Gonjiam Haunted Asylum from 2018. I might be mispronouncing that. It's a Korean film. I do not speak Korean. But this one follows a group of influencers as they go to explore a haunted asylum that other influencers have gone missing while they were doing it. It's very interesting in that the characters and the setup is actually kind of fascinating in and of itself, and the reason they're all going has its own intrigue as well. There's a lot of beginning and not a lot of actual payoff at the end, but it escalates very quickly, and the visuals are great, and with the exception of the borderline obnoxious amount of screaming in this movie, definitely worth a watch. Number 3, we've got 2016's Theyre Watching. I hated this film. I legitimately did. I hated every bit of it. I hated this movie. It is one of my least favorite movies. I really liked it right up until I didn't like it at all anymore. I don't think anyone should ever subject themselves to this movie. But I disliked it in such a way that I have watched it at least 14 different times to show my friends exactly how bad this movie gets. So that's something to be said for it. Essentially, it's a comedy horror about a group of HGTV-style home renovators who are following up for a segment that takes place in Moldova in the middle of nowhere, and it's a very, foreign places are weird, especially when they're rural, but it does have my favorite quote that I do need to put on a t-shirt, which is, "Only realtor in Moldova is best realtor in Moldova," because that is objectively true. And you would be amazed how applicable that sentence actually is in everyday life. Try it. It'll work. Don't know what to say? Say something like that. Camera broken? Only camera in Moldova is best camera in Moldova. That's all you got. It's really honestly turned around my perspective on life as a whole, and that's just wild. But anyway, it's so bad that I've watched it at least 14 times. So take that how you will. Number 4 is a new one, 2020's Host. It was a Shudder exclusive. It's only about an hour long, and I really didn't expect anything because I saw commercials for it everywhere, which usually doesn't bode well for a film, but it's surprisingly tense. It doesn't waste itself on really bad graphics. It doesn't try too hard. It follows a group of friends in quarantine who decide to do a seance over Zoom call because, to be honest, that's what you do when you've been in quarantine for a year. It's how it goes, man. It's how it goes. Mood. It does tension really well, the audio is fun, and it's only an hour long, so the fact that you're watching someone else's Zoom call doesn't really get grating at any point. It also doesn't try too hard to be in your face. There aren't a lot of cheap jump scares or anything like that. Honestly, Host might be one of my favorite found footage ghost movies, which is a surprisingly big subcategory with way more movies in it than you might expect. Number 5, 2011's Troll Hunter by Andre Odval. I do not know if I'm saying that right. I am so sorry. Whose name you might also recognize from movies like Autopsy of Jane Doe and the much more recent Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Troll Hunter is a group of students, I think, who encounter a troll in the wilds of Norway? The far north, and in fact meet a character who is a self-proclaimed troll hunter. It's a lot more comedy than actual horror, but there's definitely horror elements, and the effects for 2011 are honestly phenomenal, and it is an absolute blast to watch. Number 6, we've got The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is a mockumentary about some students doing a film on real-life slashers, and it sort of takes place under the context that all of the slashers from, like, the Halloween movies and the Friday the 13th movies are all real people. And a group of filmmakers is basically interviewing and recording the process of a man, Leslie Vernon, becoming a slasher. It's much more comedy than horror, but it is chock full of brilliant meta-commentary on the horror genre as a whole, as well as some story elements that absolutely make it worth at least some of the hype that I know it gets. Number 8, one of my all-time favorite horror movies from 2011, The Tunnel. This is an Australian found footage horror about a group of investigative reporters with a tense background going down into the tunnels because they believe the government is covering up something down there. It is a traditional found footage film in that there is some shaky cam moments that you, if you're prone to motion sickness, might have a little bit of trouble with. But the story is interesting, the characters are incredibly unlikable, and the monster is fascinating and terrifying. And honestly, this is a excellent found footage horror, and if you're looking for a good one, give this a shot. I'm also pretty sure that while it is not a Slender Man movie, it technically follows all the rules of a Slender Man movie. Like, people kind of go a little insane, and there are notes left on the walls, and stuff with eyes and stuff, and it's pretty cool. And I think that makes it a very fun little film to watch. And, the monster's neat. Number 8, another one of my all-time favorite horror movies, is Grave Encounters. If you haven't seen it, you should. It is honestly amazing, and it is kind of the grandfather of a lot of horror found footage that's happened since. It follows a film crew for a show that's very similar to, like, Ghost Adventures or that sort of thing. All they do is abuse the ghosts until they try and get them to show. But anyway, they are in a abandoned, haunted asylum with a very, very treacherous past, and things start, as you would expect, going wrong. I like this one so much because there are a lot of aspects that before this film I hadn't seen in a lot of places, and the acting is good and the visuals are very, very fun. Anyway, before I get to my all-time favorite found footage movie, there are a couple of other things I wanted to talk about just because they sort of belong here, and if you like found footage stuff, you'd probably like these. The first is the video game Outlast, which is a video game where your source of viewing the world is a camcorder, and it's shot through that, and there's 4 of them this year, I think. I think there's a new one coming out in 2021 if it isn't out already. I've only played the first one. I started the second one. I didn't get that far. I don't remember why, but it is very tense, very atmospheric, and really, really entertaining to play. Pro tip though, check your brightness, because I didn't do that, so when I played it through, I had the brightness significantly lower than you're supposed to have it when you're playing, so there were parts where I was literally running through complete darkness, which on one hand made the game a lot scarier and a lot harder, and on the other hand, it led to one scene where I had trapped myself with no battery on top of a radiator with a monster walking around, and I couldn't really do anything. But that was, anyway, it's a fun game. Give it a try. And the other one is a podcast called The White Vaults. It's currently releasing its 4th season out of 5, and it's essentially a collection of recordings from the perspective of an investigator who's looking into a missing crew that went to the Arctic. It's got some Lovecraftian elements. If you're a fan of found footage, if you're a fan of The Thing, absolutely check it out. It is brilliantly done. The acting, the writing, everything is phenomenal. And I listened to it during the blizzard last week and have been putting it on every time it snows since then, as well as using it as an excuse to clean my house, because I just want to keep listening to it. Anyway, that brings us to my favorite found footage of all time, and that is Wreck from 2007. This is a Spanish found footage horror film about a reporter who is going around with a group of first responders when they get trapped in a building with a strange sickness and they get quarantined there. There is an American remake of this called Quarantine, and it is not as good as Wreck, and it will never be as good as Wreck, and I recommend that you watch Wreck instead of Quarantine because it's just better. The scares are better, the people are more realistic, everything's more fleshed out and well written, and it's an interesting story with really good development that really does kind of play on your expectations of what's actually going on in the building. Anyway, what's your favorite found footage film? Like, comment, subscribe, do all those YouTuber things. Let me know what your favorite found footage film or found footage-ish thing is down in the comments. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, and I post new videos here every Wednesday, maybe more, we'll see whenever this goes up. See you next time. Thanks for stopping by.